Three, two, one. Hey everybody, welcome to another streaming session with the Game Ticket Show. Let's adjust my camera here. Probably should have done that before I went live. And welcome! If you are on the YouTubes, make sure to head over to my Twitch account. That's where we do live discussions here on college football. And if you are on Twitch and you want to see any previous videos I've done, I archive them all on my YouTube channel, all by the same name. Thank you guys for stopping by, and let's jump into this week's rankings. Now, a bit of a late start. I wanted to squeeze this video in because, later today it is 2:30 or almost 2:30 here in the morning for me on a Friday, and we have some college football action today with the Pac-12 title game today at 5 o'clock. So I was like, I better get this video in before those games are played, or else or be outdated. But wanted to go over some of the big changes. Wanted to address one in particular viewer, which we'll get to. He made some comments, and I thought it was really interesting. So I was like, let me dig around, see what I could pull up to prove a point in a particular team. So that'll be coming later today. But let's jump right into it. So starting off with Week 14 rankings. Let's address a team that's not on here, and that's starting with Texas A&M. Texas A&M in the committee poll rankings dropped all 10 spots with that big loss to LSU all the way to number 25. One thing you'll notice here is that I don't have any 8-4 team or any team with 4 losses in my top 25. Again, this is not a personal opinion of mine. This is strictly data-driven, just by the numbers. And the reason being is I think one thing the committee constantly overlooks, especially this is probably the most egregious it's ever been, is that there's so many small schools that have, 9, 10, 11, 12, or, it's up to 11 wins that are being overlooked, that for as great as the SEC is, and yes, they are the top conference, and it's not even close to season. Actually, they're having really, as much as I do not like the SEC, they're having a great season as a whole, and not every team in the SEC is as dominant as you think they are. Even though Texas A&M did have that big win over Alabama, with those 4 losses, there should be some smaller schools squeezed in, and we're going to talk about a few of them. Starting with number 25 here in the VPR rankings with Kentucky. Kentucky actually moved into the top 25 spot, number 25. I know same thing with the committee polls. They actually snuck in there as well. They weren't ranked last week, but this week they moved up to number 23. Really deserving. A lot to like about Kentucky. Here in the Game Ticket Show, we had them ranked before anybody else did, and I know they dropped off for a bit, but they're back, and after recovering from at least a 3-loss skid against not the worst teams. There's a lot to like about Kentucky. Strength schedule a little bit on the weaker side, strength production, which will surprise you, but again, and this is the argument I make with the SEC, even though they are the best conference this year, there's 14 teams, soon to be 16 teams. They only play 8 conference games, so they don't all play each other. And on top of that, a lot of them schedule pretty weak non-conference opponents. Maybe they'll schedule like one tough opponent, and they'll also squeeze in like a late season matchup, which is practically serves as a bye week, like here Kentucky that plays New Mexico State. So there's a lot of things that they do to hurt their strength of schedule. So for you to play, a Division II school like an FCS school, and then play New Mexico State, which is 2-10 for the year, and your toughest non-conference game seems to be Louisville, which 500 team. Your other non-conference, UL Monroe. Yeah, those 7 other opponents, or 8 other opponents you're playing in your conference, they might be good, but doesn't mean you played all the best teams. And I think it's a prime example. Look at all the teams that, even though the SEC again is dominant, the in-conference games they had were Missouri 500, South Carolina 500, Florida 500, LSU 500. Yes, they lost against Georgia, and Georgia is the best team in the country. Again, Mississippi State, Tennessee, just slightly over 500 with a 75 record. Vanderbilt, 2-10. So, yeah, really need to stress that when talking about the SEC, that do they do not all play each other, guys. So you have to remember that they may be part of the same conference, but they do not all play each other. So so scheduling can vary drastically amongst teams, and Kentucky is part of that case. And we'll jump into another team, which I get some flack for, but just something to keep in mind. But yeah, either way, we doesn't mean we don't respect Kentucky. Kentucky's very deserving to be a top 25 team, and we'll see what happens with their bowl game matchup when that's announced. Was this Sunday, right? Next, we actually have University of Louisiana in our committee rankings, which we'll go into later because I actually have them higher. In my number 24 spot, I actually have University of Utah. Now, that might surprise you. Utah is actually ranked number 17 in the committee polls. I have them ranked number 24. The reason being, and again, I'm a massive UCLA fan, even though I'm wearing red today. Not everything in my wardrobe is blue, but the Pac-12 is the worst of the Power 5 conferences. Heck, I think it's worse than really having a worse season than some of the smaller conferences like the American Athletic and the I think even the Mountain West. I had to see, but yeah, the Pac-12 is having like a really a embarrassingly bad year. I mean, there's some losses, like Washington lost to Division II school, and a lot of missed opportunities. Let's put it that way. Still, had a nice rally. The Utes struggled in the first half of the season. Really rallied in the second. Put enough 5 straight victories. Solid strength of schedule, solid strength of production. Actually, a little the weaker side strength of production. So they do deserve to be a top 25 team. It is a nice record. Definitely had some missed opportunities. They had a brutal non-conference schedule. I mean, BYU, their rival, very tough. San Diego State was no gimme. And Oregon State was having a good year, definitely pulling some upsets here and there. But yeah. With that being said, they had some nice victories over UCLA, which is a big one for them, along with the biggest one this season, which was Oregon, who they're scheduled to face later on today. But yes, Utah should be ranked, just not as high as the committee is wants them to be. Moving on to who we have here, number 23 with NC State. NC State is actually ranked number. Are they not ranked? Oh, number 18, I was about to say. 18, the committee poll, 23 here. Yeah, it's slightly overrated. Again, the ACC is not really a great conference. Better than the Pac-12 this year, but still struggling. And that shows with, the NC State straight schedule. Similar exact same situation that the SEC has, The ACC and, SEC is really big guilty on this. Is they really manipulate their numbers when it comes to inflating their win rate, because loss distribution is reduced when you play less of your opponents, right? So, or conference opponents, you play 8 games instead of 9. So those are 7 less losses that are distributed amongst your own conference. Gives you the ability to schedule one weaker opponent to inflate your win rate. And let's close that out. And yeah, so it it gives these conferences an advantage. And NC State, a pretty weak strength of schedule, 80 strength production, pretty good. They're playing pretty top-notch offenses and defenses. And yeah, won 6 of their last 6 of the last 8 games. So actually, no, I don't even know how to phrase it. 4 of the last 6 games would be a better way to phrase that. And those were some tough losses. So they won the games they were supposed to win, had a nice upset over Clemson. So NC State finishing off strong this season. Just a little bit overrated. Speaking of Clemson climbs right back into our hearts. We have them number 22. They're number 20 in the committee polls. So pretty similar train of thought there. Strength schedule so far the strongest we've covered of the ACC schools between them and NC State, and really rallied. They won 5 straight. Big win over Wake Forest, who plays in their conference title game tomorrow against Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh was a tough loss. Again, NC State having a great season. Tough loss there. And then Georgia. So, yeah, Clemson, I think, is a lot better than people give them credit for. I think the ranking is accurate, but it's not a team you want to sleep on. I mean, they've been in the national title game for whatever amount of years in a row it's been, or at least in the playoffs. So, yeah, they're definitely no gimme. And, yeah, I think that it was nice to see them finish off strong and hopefully set themselves up for next season. Moving on to number 21, we have Pittsburgh here with the VPI rankings. Pittsburgh is ranked about 6 spots higher at number 15 in the committee polls. The thing that hurts Pittsburgh is, yes, they have 10 wins, but look at their strength of schedule, 117th, one of the worst strength of schedule in the country, right? 13 spots from the worst. And, strength of production, they're not necessarily the toughest offenses and defenses. So, yes, they have a stellar offense, number 4 in the nation, and, pretty solid defense, number 42. But because they had such an easy strength of schedule, that's why a big part of why they were able to accumulate the amount of wins they were able to. And that's why I have them ranked, 6 spots lower. So, not to say, the nice thing about the conference championship games is you're going to see some big shifts with these teams that play in those games because you have one additional really tough opponent to play against. And that additional game is going to make a big difference for these teams, you'll see, when it comes to the final rankings before we jump to bowl season. So, just keep an eye out for that potential opponent of UCLA if they get invited to the Holiday Bowl. It'd be nice to play them, but there's another team I'd prefer to play. So I might be rooting for Pittsburgh on on Saturday. Next, we have Appalachian State ranked number 20. Appalachian State is not even ranked in the top 25. And let's dive into that, right? So we established that Pittsburgh has a strength of schedule at 117. Appalachian State, playing in the Sun Belt Conference, actually has a stronger strength of schedule at number 100. Yes, they lost against Miami, right, who also plays in the ACC, but they they have a solid win against Coastal Carolina, which I know is maybe not a team you think of. Coastal Carolina isn't even a top 25 team in their VPI rankings, and I don't even think they're ranked in the committee polls, right? Yeah, they're not. But remember, when we're looking at strength of schedule, we're looking at your opponents and opponents' opponents. And what happens a lot of times is even though these teams are playing against, other weak opponents within their own conference, a lot of these teams schedule strong non-conference opponents. So when you're looking at your opponent's data, which accounts for 1/3 of your strength of schedule score, that's why sometimes your strength of schedule might surprise you because you're thinking even though the Sun Belt is weak in the ACC, and again, strength of schedule 100 is not that much better than Pittsburgh, but that helps contribute to why it might surprise you that Appalachian State strength of schedule was actually tougher than Pittsburgh. So just a little explanation there. And again, the only losses that Appalachian State has are, to Miami, a Power 5 school, and to their best team within their own conference, which is Louisiana. So, again, this is why I was arguing with teams like Texas A&M that I feel like there shouldn't be any 4-loss team at this point in the season to be in the top 25 with so many smaller schools that are deserving to be there. That's why I have Appalachian State at number 20, because they are 10-2. Even you have to have some sort of value with these wins. So how many more wins did Appalachian State need to have than, again, a team that plays in the SEC? What are the value of those wins compared? How much more do they have to win compared to when some of these bigger name schools? And we're saying that, yes, when we're looking at this number here, the VPI per game, this is the value of each one of their wins, and they have to win more than those bigger schools in order to have the same amount of respect, if that makes sense. And this is also the quality of their losses. So even comparing them to Pittsburgh Pittsburgh, the quality of the wins and losses is about the same, again, because the weak strength of schedule and the strength of production not being great. So we'll have more examples of that, but just wanted to demonstrate that. Moving on to number 19, Oregon. Oregon, I feel bad because, again, I am Pac-12 homer. I've been ripping them all season. I keep reminding everybody that Oregon has no business being a top 10 team. They have no business being top 10 team nearly all season. And again, the thing I have to point out with Oregon is that when they only had one loss after the Week 5 loss to Stanford, out of all the teams with one loss up to until they lost against Utah, they had the worst loss of any of those teams, and Stanford proved to be a really, really bad team. So even though you might think Oregon is great, that loss should have really hurt them, right? So it shouldn't have even had them in the playoff conversation at any point in the season, not even close to it. And then, I think the loss to Utah really just kind of did them in. Another thing to consider, again, I'm a Pac-12 homer, and it hurts to say this, but their strength of schedule, because the Pac-12 was so bad this season, was really bad at 98, just slightly better than even Appalachian State. The strength of production, solid. There is some great offenses and defenses in the Pac-12. Yes, Ohio State was a massive win. We cannot dismiss how important that win is, especially when Ohio State, before the loss to Michigan, was in the playoff conversation. But Oregon, again, that one loss, and I want to specify that, especially when you talk about some other teams, that one win should not be the determinant for your entire season, right? You can't just carry your entire season based off of one win. You got to look at the rest of the schedule. So it's no different if you're looking at a small school that pulls off a major upset over, let's say Appalachian State were able to go in there and then beat Georgia, per se, right? Would you carry Appalachian State as a playoff contender the entire season based off that one win? Or would you look at the rest of the schedule, because they play in the Sun Belt Conference, would you hold that against them at that point? You would. The same thing needs to be applied to Power 5 schools. Just because you play in a Power 5 conference, and yes, your opponents are tougher than some of the small conferences, again, the Pac-12 is weak, and you have to look at other things in their non-conference schedule. I mean, they played Fresno State, which is a great win. Fresno State's a really good team, but they also played an FCS school, which should hurt you. So the Pac-12 being weak, you got to give them credit for the win over Ohio State. But the thing you have to really, really look at is that they lost against Stanford, one of the worst losses of any team with the same record as Oregon intended to. But still has a chance to finish strong. Regardless, this is, I'll mute. Oregon's not getting the plus regardless, so I shouldn't really get worked up that they're a top 10 team. It's great for the Pac-12, great for Oregon. We could argue day and night about them being, they should be ranked lower or not, but ultimately the rankings are here to determine, basically New Year 6, some New York, the at-large bids for the New Year 6 bowls and the playoff. That's really it. We really, there's no point to argue about the remaining rankings. It's just to stir people up. It's a marketing ploy. So that's really all this is. But anyways, fun to talk about regardless. Oregon, overrated. Love them, but overrated. Moving on to another school that should be in the playoff, or not the playoff conversation, but should be ranked. The committee has them at number 21. We have number 18. So we respect Houston just a little bit more than the committee. They started with a tough loss against a 500 Texas Tech team, but they've ran 11 straight, and that should definitely account for something. Finished off the season against UConn, which I should note, I just found out today that Jim Mora, former UCLA coach, was hired there. I absolutely loved him as their head coach. I thought that even though I understood why they let him go, because obviously they weren't wanted to try to get Chip Kelly, and as much as I enjoyed the season we're having with Chip Kelly, they did Jim Mora dirty. He, with everything he did for UCLA and how he turned around that program, and I knew he had a few bad seasons, and you have to consider the injury to Josh Rosen. You have to consider that he was changing up our offense because he got rid of Noel Mazzoni, because even though he could have continued to get 9-10 wins every season with that offense, he knew that you needed to get over the hump to beat Stanford at that time. And if Stanford's top dog, you got to figure out how to beat the top dog. So, yes, it was a risk and it hurt him, but it was a risk worth taking, and I think that he just got done dirty. He did way too much. Ben Howland got 10 years. And even Ben Howland shouldn't have been fired the way he was. And that's a whole different story about how his final season. On a bad season, I'll say this, even though it's basketball related. On a bad season, Ben Howland won the Pac-12 title. His leading scorer broke his foot on their way to the Pac-12 title game, and then we lost. And it wasn't even like a blowout loss to Oregon, but we lost to Oregon. And of course, we get bounced in the first, game of the tournament. Because again, our leading scorer broke his foot for the season. So, anyways, just random rant about a basketball thing that from 10 years ago. It was, I'm still upset about. But that being said, yeah. Coach Mora, I love you. I will never forget what you did for the program, and best of luck over there at UConn. I really hope you prove everybody wrong, because you were done dirty, and I hope you ever bounce back to your feet. I'll be rooting for you. So, send out a message to a guy who will never in a million years see this video. Whew, okay, love doing this. Love covering college football here. Moving on to another small school with BYU. BYU finishing off with the big win. Well, I mean, big win as far as the program you're facing. It is USC. Surprisingly, even though it's big on the Cougars, and again, I have to always reiterate how the Cougars had the schedule to make a push for the playoffs, right? I think what would have hurt them, and I don't think they would have got in looking at things now, looking at how weak their strength of schedule is with the number 82. Strength production is okay, right? But playing Baylor, right, who's playing the Big 12 championship game, and then playing Bush, they won those two. They would have made a push, but I think because they're independent school, and they don't have that one extra game they play against a tough opponent in the conference title game this season, that's what really hurts, BYU. I mean, Notre Dame could get away with it, but yeah, and BYU, just too small of a school. But man, I wish they were higher ranked on here. But again, I have no input on here. It's just the data, and I know that a lot of times it shocks people when I have some small schools ranked in the top 5 or 6, right? With there's Texas San Antonio, which we'll get into later. But another small school, but they just don't have enough there to deserve such a high rank number 12. They'll probably drop after the conference title game with some of these changes we'll see. I'm thinking specifically either Pittsburgh or maybe Wake Forest comes to mind with now the outcome of that game. But anyways, forget about all that. Love the Cougs. Glad they're having a great season, and hope they get a big bowl game matchup. Oklahoma, we have all the way to number 16. They had a tough loss against their conference rival and state rival as well with Oklahoma State. One thing I should point out before I jump really into Oklahoma is in the first few weeks when I covered this, I would explain how the more data we get, the more accurate these rankings get. And as I'm looking at this, with the exception of a few teams, it's surprising how close these rankings are. There a lot of these you'll notice I'm within 2 to 3 spots. Some are up to 5 or 6. Some are like way off teams that aren't even ranked, like Appalachian State I was covering. But the data to match up with what the public thinks is pretty interesting to see when we're basically rounding out the end of this before the conference title games. So it is interesting to see that, all the data supports that I have Oklahoma number 16, committee has number 14. So really close there. And again, when you're ranking 130 teams, to have it to this close is pretty fascinating, I think, when you look at the top 25. But anyways, back to Oklahoma. The one thing I kept mentioning all season about Oklahoma is they had a really weak strength of schedule. Even though the Big 12 conference as a whole is solid, I think they're the third best conference. It's just Oklahoma because they play Tulane, a Division II school. and Nebraska, who was having a really bad season. Sorry, Ethan. Yeah, it really hurt the strength schedule, and that's why most of the season I felt like they were overrated. Even at some points, they were matching up pretty close to where the playoff committee had them. But yeah, that's it for the Sooners and their playoff hopes, and we'll see where they end up their bowl matchup. Speaking of bowl matchups and potentials for title games, Baylor is not one of those teams. They had their shot, but no, their loss against Oklahoma State and TCU, especially the TCU game, really did them in. But look at the strength schedule, a lot, almost halfway or twice as high as Oklahoma, where they're at number 54, and their strength production, solid. Maybe not playing the best offense defenses out there, but there's a lot to like about Baylor. We have them at number 15. The playoff committee has them at number 9. So we're saying that Baylor's just a tad overrated. And I really think it's the TCU loss that probably hurts them the most when it comes to these VPI rankings. But nonetheless, we'll see who comes out on top between them and Oklahoma State. Probably rooting more for Oklahoma State because I think realistically it'd be best for their conference and has the best chance to try to sneak into the playoffs, which we'll cover it a little bit later. Wake Forest. Now, I'm kind of personally rooting for Pittsburgh to beat Wake Forest, only because here we have it at number 14, and the playoff committee polls, they actually are number 16. So pretty close in rankings there. But the reason being is I kind of want them to face off against UCLA in the Holiday Bowl. I don't know what it is about. Pittsburgh would be fine, but I think Wake Forest. Now their ranks are pretty much where they should be. But before this, they were kind of underrated all season. And someone said this in another video I saw in the comment section saying how if Wake Forest was Clemson, they would be in the playoff committee, or they would be in the playoff talks earlier in the season. But because they weren't, they were kind of overlooked. But they're finally getting the respect they deserve. They have a chance to take the ACC title. Really interesting how they have a top 10 offense, but their defense is on the wrong side of the rankings here at 99. Not a bad loss against Clemson. Probably the loss that really hurt them. The one they really should have won is North Carolina. So had they beat North Carolina, maybe would have still been in discussion for the playoff hopes. I don't know. No, Pittsburgh's not strong enough, even if they were within shooting distance. Yeah, the ACC is unfortunately too weak to have someone represent them. So, yeah, it's going to be interesting. Somebody's going to... Well, we'll talk about there's some few scenarios I could see for the playoffs, so we'll get into that a little bit later. But yeah, Demi Deacons, the Deacons are having great season. Hope we face off against them, but best of luck in their title game. Louisiana, we're probably at one of the first rankings that's really going to shock people that I have them as high as I do. Louisiana is ranked number 24 in the playoff committee. I have them all the way up to number 13. You might be asking why. Why would you have the audacity to put a team that has the second worst strength of schedule and the fourth worst strength of production in the country at number 13? Here's why. I mentioned earlier with Appalachian State that wins have to have value, and the quality of the wins for Louisiana is actually worse than Appalachian State. But it doesn't, and even the quality of their losses is worse than Appalachian State and Pittsburgh and all those teams. But again, wins have value, and even though you have to look at it comparing Louisiana State to all the other 11-1 schools, they are the worst. There's so many schools ranked ahead of them. But again, 11 wins have to amount to something. Each win has value, and even though they're valued less, they've accumulated 11 of them. So that's why we have Louisiana at number 13. And I would say this a lot with some of this. We'll cover another small school that's coming up that's going to shock you that have ranked as high as they are. Is when these small schools there, it's a slow climb up, and it's a really fine line that they run, because anytime they lose against one of these really weak opponents, they get hurt, and they get hurt bad. So, but that shouldn't deter of what Louisiana has accomplished. So we have them here as number 13. I think that's deserving, because regardless, it is tough to win, 10 games, tough to win 11 games. But Louisiana should be ranked a lot higher. I think that those wins have to carry just a little more value than the given. And I want to talk about, I'm going to come back to Louisiana and also another small school when we get into the playoff conversation. I think you guys know what I'm talking about, because it'll be interesting to show you some comparisons there. Next, at number 12, we come at with Michigan State. Michigan State, we have number 11. Man, these rankings are so close. Crazy how the data is supporting what the playoff committee is putting with a lot of these. Big Ten Conference, usually gets a lot more love than they have been getting this season. Most years that I've done this, the Big Ten spends most of the season, if not the entire season, at the number one spot. I think one year the SEC took them last second in the bowl games. But the Big Ten is usually the strongest conference. This year they're the second strongest. Showed Michigan State here being number 60 in the strength of schedule rankings, and number 28 in strength production. So they're facing some top-notch offenses and defenses. Had a shot at the playoffs, I think, at one point, but then they kind of faltered with that Purdue and Ohio State loss. But still had a great season. It really surprises me that their defense is as bad as it is. I think a lot of years it's the defense that's carried them. Offense is solid, but 10-2, great season for the Spartans. Wishing luck in their bowl game, whoever they face. Iowa, number 11 here, number 13, the playoff committee polls. I'm glad they're finally getting the recognition they deserve. I found it so strange that Iowa was a top 3 team at one point, and that they got just absolutely plummeted in the rankings. Again, I did not understand why they were treated so harshly, and now they're climbing back up. I think they've kind of reconciled things with the committee. And there's a lot to like. Strength schedule is solid, 57. Strength production is 29. Again, Big Ten is facing some of the best offenses, defense in the nation. I find it so fascinating this team has a top-notch defense, right? Number 13 in the nation, but their offense is so bad. Like, it does not... I get that defense wins championships, but my goodness, like, the fact, like, what are you, kicking field goals to win a game? Like, I don't really follow Iowa, unfortunately, but I don't know. It's just such a fascinating stat to see with the team that has this good of a record. But yeah, I mean, defense wins championships for reasons. Iowa's having a great season, another 10-2 team, and I don't know, Big Ten is tough, guys. Don't overlook them. Okay, another team that you're gonna think I'm absolutely crazy, and in the comments, I'm sure I'll get absolutely murdered for this, because University of Texas San Antonio isn't even a top 25 team. I don't think on any poll. Maybe the AP polls, I don't know. I had to look, but at least for the committee poll, they are not nearly a top 25 team. I have them here at number 10, and you're gonna think absolutely wild. That, like, how does a team who's number 126, right, the 4th worst strength of schedule, and the 19th worst strength of production, right? They're number 111 in strength of production. Be a top 10 team. Oh man, this is and it gets worse. There's some other teams I'm gonna go to. I love when I have to explain this, but again, wins have to carry some sort of value, right? Even if you think that these wins are half as good as Power 5 schools, they still have to hold some kind of weight. So for you to win 11 games, it's a slow climb. I have to keep saying that. And because you've accumulated an X amount of wins and only one loss, and they say 11 wins and 1 loss, it carries some fun value. And again, you have to look at the perspective has out of the 11-1 schools, UTSA and Louisiana are the worst amongst the level 1 schools, but they are still in the level 1 school. So that has to hold something. I get they play in Conference USA. I get their strength schedule is garbage. But I promise you it'll make sense once I get to one team in particular. I have in mind. I have to get through one more small school, and then we'll and again, you guys know who I'm talking about. But that's you'll see. You'll see. Just hang in there, guys. Let's get through a few more of these. Going into, do I want to become famous? Do I want to buy followers? Ooh, here I am excited thinking somebody's actually taking the time to watch my stream. And we're just going to have to block you. That's terrible. And we're just going to ban him. Okay. Sorry. I want to get spam. Oh, man. Well, it helps my views, I guess, for somebody to stop. But that one viewer I had. All right. Jumping into Ole Miss. Ole Miss, even though I do not like the SEC, I had number 9. Playoff Committee has number 8. So we'll really split hairs here. Interesting with Ole Miss is, just like we're talking about Iowa, having a top-notch defense and terrible offense. Flip script with Ole Miss. They are number 5 in total offense, even though I don't like Lane Kiffin. I guess you got to give it to him, man. He's having a great season. But just a terrible defense. Another interesting stat is, even though the strength of schedule is mediocre with Ole Miss, the strength of production is number 4 in the nation, which really shocks me. And if I haven't explained it before, but or if you're new to this channel, strength of production is a stat I used where I'm looking at a team or your opponent's total offense and total defense, and I combine that and I give it a rank. And I'm not only looking at your opponents, but your opponent's opponents. The way it's calculated, the way is the same way strength schedule is calculated, but it's a metric I used in order to kind of look at how tough of the teams you're playing are statistically on the field, And what VPI, while I'm in there, what VPI is I coined Victory Production Index, which is looking at basically the quality of the win-loss schedule or of your opponent's win, and the quality of their offenses and defenses, and I combine both of those, and that's what determines these top 25 rankings. So, anyways, that's why I have it all broken out here. But just metrics I use to try to rank teams, and as you're seeing, a lot of similarities with a few exceptions with some of the small schools. But when I try to show the validity behind these rankings, is if the same metrics are being applied across the board to all these schools, and the conclusions are being met the same, where you're seeing a lot of the big name schools, right, where, like Ole Miss is with only one spot difference from what the playoff committee has them. Same thing with Michigan State, Baylor, Clemson, they're all within a few spots of that, right? So if those metrics seem to be accurate with all those schools, right, whether you agree or disagree, I mean, we're only talking 1 or 2 spots here and there, if I'm applying those same metrics to small schools, the results should be the same with the playoff committee, but they're not. So it's the whole purpose of me building this database and doing this streaming, here at 2 or 3 in the morning, is to show the biases that exist within college football, because again, there's no there's no personal opinion or anything I put into these rankings of where I think things should be. It's strictly data driven. It's all calculated. I have zero input. These are just, I put in the data. This is what it spews out. So I think it's so fascinating that with all the Power 5 schools, a lot of them are pretty close to where the playoff committee and the AP polls and all that have them, especially this late in the season, because as you get more and more data, the more and more accurate these rankings get. But when you apply those same metrics to small schools, there's such a huge disparity. And that's what you're seeing here. So we'll jump into one more small school in a minute. But yeah, I just wanted to point that out. So with the exception, at this point, this is pretty much as accurate as the rankings going to get. The bowl games and the conference championship games are just kind of icing on top. I just add a little more data. But yeah, this is basically almost the final result of the VPI rankings. Moving on to Ohio State, which really, Ohio State was a really good team, statistically on here. They're still the number one offense in the nation, and for them to actually get just absolutely destroyed and blown out by Michigan, it blows my mind. I don't think anybody saw that coming, but especially me, just look at the data. Look at their strength of schedule. Number 21 in the nation, number 22 in strength of production. Their defense is mediocre, but their offense number one in the nation, and they just got obliterated by Michigan. So really shocked. Michigan's great, and I've had them ranked a lot higher than most people did most of the season, but man, that still shocked me. So outside of that, the Ohio State was tested, and for them to still show up with a 10-2 record, this still should be a top 10 team. We have them here number 8, and the committee has number 7. So yeah, they absolutely should be respected. Just tragic for the Buckeyes to basically be done with the playoff conversation, because they are a really good team. Moving on now, this is the last small school that was going to shock people before we go into the final one. Do you guys want to talk about San Diego State? San Diego State, again, it's all these metrics apply the same. So if you agree with all the other teams more or less, you got to agree with what I'm saying here with some of these small schools. San Diego State's, the metrics are being applied the same. I get that San Diego State has the 12th worst strength schedule in the nation at 118, and the strength production, right, of the teams are 92, right? I get they play in the Mountain West, which surprisingly I think is doing better than the Pac-12, but still, San Diego State's worst loss is one against the second best team in their conference with Fresno State. Actually, third best team. For Air Force is slightly better, but still beat Power 5 schools with like Arizona and Utah. I know they did lose against Fresno State, but we're saying that at 11-1 schools, they don't belong in the playoff conversation, but we are saying they are a top 10 school. And I'll keep saying until I'm blue in the face, wins have to carry some sort of value. Even if you consider schools from Power 5 conferences, their quality of their wins to be valued more, that value has to add up. And you have to ask yourself, how many more wins does a small school have to win in order to equal like an 8-2 or 8-4 or 9-3 big name school? That's what we're trying to answer with these VPI rankings. But yeah, we'll just leave it at that. Don't really want to waste too much more time because I keep repeating the same thing over and over. I don't know how else to explain it. I'm hoping next year when I do this again that I have a better way to kind of convey the message of what we're trying to do. But moving on to Oklahoma State. Oklahoma State really got a shot to make a jump into the playoffs, depending on how things play out this weekend and what the committee decides to do. We have them ranked number 6. The committee polls have them ranked number 5. So here in the committee polls, we just have this like right there knocking on the door. Big 12 conference, again, third best conference in the nation. So you think, you would have one representative from the third best conference, right? Strength production is okay. Only loss is to Iowa State team, which definitely was pulling out upsets here and there. But, with the huge win over their in-state rival against Oklahoma, and having a tough opponent against Baylor, Baylor's not going to be a gimme. Baylor is ranked a lot higher in the committee polls, where opposed to I committee, being a top 10 team versus what I have Baylor at what I have him at number 15. I have Baylor to be ranked a lot lower, but still, if the committee polls are looking at a number 9 team with the team that's knocking the door, there's a chance they could leap Cincinnati. Really curious how that's going to play out. All right. Time to jump to the real controversies here, right? How dare I have Alabama, the darling of the SEC, right, at number 5? Here we go. The thing you have to look at with Alabama is a few things, right? Alabama does not have the best strength of schedule. Their strength of schedule is literally like right down like the middle. They are as mediocre as they come. Number 6 out of 130 teams, they're ranked number 64. They're like just as close to dead center, right in the middle. It can be, right? I think UCLA is literally at 65, so both of them have the same strength of schedule. I think is funny. Their strength of production, they are facing some of the best offenses and defenses in the nation. So Alabama should be respected. Their total offense, number 7 nation. Total defense, they're a powerhouse. I get that. But a few things you have to look at Alabama. Their strength of schedule, mediocre, right? They have one great win against Ole Miss. But here's what hurts them. And this is what's going to separate them from some of the schools we're going to talk about in a minute, right? Alabama played an FCS school. FCS schools still have someone opponent. I treat FCS schools as winless teams, essentially. They are they should be treated as such. Their FCS schools record against as a whole, combine all the FCS schools that play against Division I schools. They with the exception of a few upsets, it's overwhelmingly dominant from the Division I schools and those outcomes. And you need to treat those schools as the worst schools in college football when you treat them, because again, they're playing different division. They are division lower. They don't have access to the same resources and recruiting and talent, all of that you do as a Division I school. Even if you are UConn, going one win or whatever, leave winless, whatever it was, you still have an advantage over the FCS school, even though I think UConn even lost an FCS school. But anyways, let's leave UConn out of this. We're talking about Alabama, so that has to be looked at. The loss they have is against solid, not amazing, but solid Texas A&M team, right? When you look at that, the remainder of the schedule, there's a lot of good teams. Like I'm not going to dismiss and say that there's a lot of teams with winning records. Miami has a winning record. Florida could finish with a winning record, depending on what happens in their bowl game. Mississippi State winning record, Tennessee, LSU could have a winning record. So their schedule wasn't necessarily easy, but it wasn't deserving enough. Combining that, the FCS school, and the lost Texas A&M, all of that puts in number 5. It is so tough to differentiate some of these teams when you get into your top 4 or 5 rankings here. And we have Alabama with a VPA ranking of 41.34. Let's jump into who we have at number 4. And this is also going to piss one person off, right? So let's address the elephant in the room. I had a comment last week, and I thought it was interesting, right? Didn't get upset or anything from somebody. I won't name by name, but if you are watching, I just want to say hello. Do appreciate you even stopping by to see my video. But let's jump into Notre Dame. There's some criticism about Notre Dame being a number 2 school. They actually dropped number 4 in the rankings. And even if you're watching this now, like, how are they ranked number 2? How are they ranked number 4? How are they ranked ahead of Alabama? This is what we have to look at. When we're looking at Notre Dame, I understand that they don't have that one signature win. But let's compare Notre Dame to Alabama. It is a fraction of a percent difference between Notre Dame and Alabama when I have separating in the VP articles, right? Both the same record, right? Alabama, if you could read that, it has a victory production index of 41.34. Notre Dame, 41.49. It is a fraction of a percent, right? We're talking about 0.15% of a difference in their score. when we're comparing the two schools, you have to look at, yes, the strength of production of Alabama is higher, but the strength of schedule for Notre Dame is higher. Not much higher, right? 43 to compare to 64 isn't a huge difference. But you have to look at Notre Dame didn't play an FCS school. That's why I pointed that out, right? I understand that Notre Dame's best win is against Wisconsin, where where Alabama's best win is against Ole Miss. So I understand the discrepancy there, right? They don't have as high as a high. But the other thing you have to look at is that Notre Dame's loss, their only loss of the season, is against an undefeated playoff contending Cincinnati versus Alabama's loss, which we could all argue, I think everybody agree, was a worse loss against an 8-4 Texas A&M team, which I understand the top 25 in the committee poll. I'm saying that there should be no 8-4 team in the top 25. So that's what you have to look at. I understand. I understand it's the SEC, right, and best conference in the nation. I get the hype. I get all of that, but you have to look at, even though the highs of the high, one point for Alabama there. You got to give a point to Notre Dame for having not played an FCS school, right? So their weakest of weak opponents is nowhere. That one opponent, there's no opponent weaker that Notre Dame has faced than Alabama playing an FCS school. Alabama's loss to Cincinnati is way better than Alabama, or Notre Dame's loss to Cincinnati is way better than Alabama's loss to Texas A&M. Strength of schedule is better. Strength of production, even though it is not as high, still, top 26. So that's why, again, it's a fraction of percent. But let me tell you something that's going to happen to address, even if you still want to say that this ranking is garbage because I have Notre Dame ranked so high as a playoff contender team. And the reason I told you to even come back in 2 weeks, not 1 week, is because if Notre Dame wins over Georgia, they're going to leapfrog. If Alabama, I'm getting all mixed up. If Alabama wins over Georgia, they're going to leapfrog Notre Dame because Notre Dame, their season is done here. But all these schools that are playing conference championship games, they would leapfrog them. Again, but this is according to my rankings. Notre Dame is not even in the playoff conversation. They are ranked number 6, right? So if they were in the conference, if they had some kind of conference or championship game or some kind of bonus game, obviously, they would be in the conversation. But they're not. Their season is done. But if you're wondering why Notre Dame has been ranked number 2 and now number 4, right? They dropped, but why they were even in the playoff conversation with these VPI rankings, that's why. That's the explanation. You don't have to agree with it, but the data is there to support it. That's it. Anyways, that is fun. No hard feelings or anything on that. I definitely appreciate the constructive criticism, and thank you for being respectful throughout their conversation. But to that one viewer, just thought I'd have fun to explain that. Anyways, we took too much time. I'm trying to wrap this up before we hit the hour mark. We got 7 minutes left, but moving on to, I had number 3, Michigan, who is ranked number 2 in the college playoff committee. Definitely deserves. They haven't locked it in, but they still have their conference championship game. But assuming they win that, they are locked in. It's funny, all these other teams we're uncertain of. But Michigan, as long as they just take care of it, they are locked in into the playoffs. Actually, between Alabama and Georgia, that's the lock into for the SEC. Anyways, going back to Michigan. Michigan, lots of like. Number 36 in strength of schedule, number 30 in strength of production, 11-1. Tough loss to Michigan State, but look at that offensive defense. I understand, you're wondering, even Michigan, how are they ranked ahead of Alabama when Alabama has number 7 offense and defense. Remember, we're looking at your resume based off who you played, and you look the strength of schedule being higher, even though the strength of production is slightly lower. That's what put Michigan at number 3. So it's like, yeah. Anyways, I don't want to do a whole nother spew comparing Michigan and listen. Alabama's going to get in if they win the playoffs, so it doesn't matter what I have here in these rankings. Alabama's going to get in as long as they win beat Georgia. So it's on viewpoint. This isn't a deciding factor at all. This is just a fun, data-driven ranking that I do, making arguments about what teams should be in and out. But yeah, so Michigan having great. So let's get into number 2. You might be wondering, how is Cincinnati ranked number 2 ahead of, especially when Michigan had that massive win over Ohio State, and the whole Alabama and all that, Notre Dame and everything we've gone into. So let's jump into this, because I think this is what's really going to drive home everything we've talked about when talking about some of the smaller schools that are a lot. 99.9% of you would probably disagree why I have them ranked as high as they are. Cincinnati, right? So let's look at this. Cincinnati has the 122nd worst strength of schedule in the country, 109th strength of production, right? How is a team with this horrible of stats ranked number 2 in the nation? Why are they even in the playoff conversation? I understand that the playoff committee, they're holding on by a thread, will probably be left out. They'll probably get leapfrog, right? We'll see how the committee treats these title games, or these conference championship games, I'd say, not title games. But how is this team ranked as high as they are here, and how are they in the playoff conversation with the playoff committee? I'm going to say over time, you guys are going to go nuts. Wins have to hold some kind of value, right? The committee sees that. The AP polls see that. I understand that Cincinnati's been building up their resume the past few seasons, having great season after great season. So it took a lot for them to get here. But again, the American Athletic Conference, fourth best conference in the nation. But with this really weak strength of schedule, Cincinnati has accumulated enough wins, being undefeated, to be part of that playoff conversation on all those polls, including here. So first, I'm going to argue the point of how this relates to the other small schools, with San Diego State, with UTSA, with Louisiana ranked as high as they are, all with really similar schedules as Cincinnati. So if the playoff committee is seeing Cincinnati as a playoff contender, why aren't they recognizing that with the smaller schools? I'm telling you that I'm using the same metrics across the board. If all the other big name schools are ranked more or less, right? We could argue about against Notre Dame and Alabama, but still, we're arguing about just like 1 or 2 spots, right? Difference here and there. If they're this close, using those same metrics across the board here in these rankings, why are we treating small schools so differently? And I find it so fascinating that the playoff committee, the AP polls, and all that could disagree so much on these small schools, right? Like just undervalue them so much. But this one school with Cincinnati, they've respected, even though they have the same resume as the small schools. Look out. Again, 122nd worst strength of schedule, 109th strength of production. I'm not saying Cincinnati doesn't deserve to be a playoff team, but what I am saying is that wins have to carry value. And if you get enough of them, even if you play a weak strength of schedule, you need to be recognized for it, because it is still difficult to win 9, 10, in this case 12 games, go undefeated. I am very curious to see how the playoff committee is going to treat Cincinnati after their conference title game. I'm really curious how it's going to turn up here, because you get that one really tough game. So from a data perspective, the statistics of those teams, like Alabama playing the number 1 team in the nation, like Oklahoma State, like Michigan, like all these teams playing that one extra tough opponent versus Cincinnati, who's going to play probably the weakest of all these Power 5 schools in their conference title game. Really curious how it's going to turn up here. Really curious what the committee is going to decide. I have them number 2. They're probably, if the VPI rankings were the ones that decide this, they would probably be safe. But I'm so fascinated to see what the committee is going to do. I would absolutely, even if they don't deserve it, I would still love to see Cincinnati get a shot just to give smaller schools more recognition to be in the playoff conversation, because again, there's so many small schools to be overlooked. Like I keep mentioning San Diego State, UTSA, who's not even ranked, Louisiana, like all undervalued schools. So yeah. So for those reasons, I'm really cheering for Cincinnati. Really, really fascinating to see what's going to happen here. And let's finish this off with the team who's ranked number 1, and it's really not even close. It astounds me how big of a difference there is between Georgia and everybody else. Georgia, with such a wide look at these bars alone. Look at the wide margin between just Georgia and next close school I have here with Cincinnati. Right, nearly a 5-point difference, over a 5-point difference, which I know it doesn't make sense to you guys, but from the data standpoint, it's huge. Georgia ranked number 1. It's not even close. Their strength of schedule, mediocre, right? 69. You're thinking it's the SEC, best team in the country. I get that, but does it dismiss the fact that even though Georgia played Clemson, which was a great win, they also played a Division II school. They also played Georgia Tech. They didn't play all their toughest opponents. They didn't play Alabama, for instance. The best team I think they played within conference was Kentucky. So again, gonna repeat one last time. The way the schedule structure of the SEC and the ACC, it's so misleading, and it inflates the stats of those conferences. But anyways, doesn't dismiss the fact that Georgia is the best team in the country. For now, we'll see what happens when they play against Alabama. It is Alabama. They're not a gimme. But I'm so curious because there's such a big, at least here with the VPI formula, there's such a big difference between Georgia and everybody else that if Alabama to win, does the SEC, even though I would hate this because I'm so against them ever when they do this, the SEC having 2 schools in there. It's so dumb that it should be just one team per conference, right? It's such a dumb rule that they allow for up to 2. You could have multiple teams from the same conference. I've had enough of the SEC, but there would be such a strong argument to have both Georgia and Alabama in the title game, or so the playoffs, I would say, if Alabama wins. If Georgia beats Alabama, no. I think that it's basically in discussion. But if Alabama beats Georgia, and Georgia's being as dominant as they are, the number 1 team in the country, yeah, it would be super fascinating how that would play out from that perspective, even though I'm so against it, and I hope it does not happen. Nothing never happens. It has happened already. But, yeah, that's very interesting. So, that is it. Again, the conference title games are later today. We'll see how things play out. I have to do one more after the conference title game of these videos. Maybe I'll do another stream after the bowl games or in between. We'll see how that plays out. But at the very least, you guys got me for 2 more videos. We'll see what happens. Let me know in the comments what you think of these crazy rankings. Very rarely do I go over an hour on these streams when I talk about college football. So, like I said, a lot more talk than I thought. I really want to thank everybody for watching. Consider following me on Twitch. That's my main platform. On the way to 50. We have 38. Let's get those last 12 to try to get hit our goal of 50 followers. And if you're on the YouTube, feel free to give me a follow there too. For fun. But this is my main platform. Head over to Twitch and come hang out for a bit. But thank you guys all for watching. I will see you guys all next week. Good night, everybody.